what I'm going to focus on is something that we're seeing really emerging in the marketplace today, which is the sales enablement discipline within sales organizations. Now, this has been something that's been kind of evolving over the last couple of years. Back in 2012, we started asking the question, is there a person or persons in your sales organizations whose main focus is increasing the effectiveness of your sales teams? Not just the training person or the CRM person, but somebody looking at things at a more holistic view. And back then, 19.2% of the companies said yes. And it was interesting because we found some very mature type programs, like at Experian, Kelly Stevenson was senior vice president of sales effectiveness. And, so very high position, been doing that job for like 10 years. But it's the type of thing was kind of growing. This last year, when we asked the same question, we got up to 56% of companies. So, a lot of interest in this thing on how do we increase the effectiveness of our organizations. But when we take a look at that, how it's being implemented, we see a lot of different ways and a lot of different strategies for things. Some being very, one-off project focus. Let's just go dealing with onboarding and then let's move on. To other organizations where they have a full-blown charter, a full-blown team that's focused on this on a regular basis. So we're going to be diving into this thing, sharing with you some of the data that will really help you understand the business case for investing in sales enablement. And then I want to share with you 5 critical success factors on how to make that investment generate the best positive results going forward. Now, why sales enablement? It's interesting because when I take a look at the now of sales, so far this year I've done the sales keynote for Dow Chemical, United Technologies. I met with the senior leadership team at Cable and Wireless. So it's at the Elevate conference. And every time I'm out speaking in front of a bunch of sales professionals, I ask the same question. What sales look like today? Is it a lot easier than it was 5 years ago? Easier? Is it about the same? A little harder or a lot harder? And mostly what I hear from people is, it's either harder or a lot harder. And the question that begs is that perception or is it a reality? I mean, I think we all think we work hard. I'm sure the people in finance think they work hard, marketing, manufacturing, etc. But looking at the world of sales, we've got a unique capability because we've been doing primary research on what are the challenges facing sales teams, why those problems exist, but more importantly, what do you do about it? For the last 25 years, this is our 25th annual sales effectiveness study. And so I went back and started taking a look at the data and coming back, and even things like, 1999, 2000, when we had the technology industry meltdown, 2008, 2009, the economic meltdown, even taking a look at those things, I found that if there was ever a time that sales was easy, now is not it. It's just not. In terms of some of the major metrics that would really give us a feel for what's going on in the world of sales, they're kind of scary. So let me share with you a couple of those, because one of the things that we track as part of our research is let's take a look what's happening in the sales pipeline. And the first thing we always look at is, are we getting in the door? Are we able to take qualified leads and at least turn those into first discussions? So I went back and took a look at the numbers for 2012 and then progressively up to 2017, last year's data that we completed. And here's what I found out. It's getting a lot harder. Going back to 2012, when we asked companies, what's happening with qualified leads? What percentage of those leads end up as just a first discussion? We're just starting an opportunity. And back then it was 47.5% of the companies said we've got a conversion rate of greater than 50%. Now, 25% of those said, hey, man, our conversion rate's greater than 75. Now look what's happened over that period of time. For last year, we're down to 34.4%. And look at that drop in the number of companies that had a conversion rate of greater than 75%. It's almost cut in half. So I went back through and said, okay, is this just an anomaly? But no, when we took a look at first discussions, they were able to convert to a presentation. That's down by double digits. One thing that didn't change very much was a number of presentations that converted to a proposal. That only dropped about a couple percent, but in reality, that's totally in the hands of a salesperson. I can arbitrarily decide that I'm going to send out a proposal. But what happens is a litmus test. What about those proposals? What percentage of those converted into sales? That's down double digits. So we're starting to see this kind of, problems coming up in all aspects of the sales cycle. And the question that begs is then, okay, is that really impacting salespeople's effectiveness? And the answer is yes. I posted this on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago. And I talked about the fact that when I look back at 2012, when we asked the question, what percentage of your sales force achieved plan, it was 63%. And what you see here is this slide over the last several years, down to where in 2017, that number dropped to 53%. So that's pretty scary out there for most sales organizations. Having run sales for software companies that I co-founded, I understand the fact that if only 53% of their people, my people, are hitting their number, what are the odds of me hitting my number as a CSO? And when I posted this, I got an abnormally high number of people, reviewing it, commenting on it. So it was really something that I think we hit a nerve. So that's the first thing that sales enablement needs to start taking a look at is, how do I reverse this trend? We get back up to more people being successful. Now, there are a couple other things that have happened, that our studies have shown that are worth focusing on. And that's the thing of, it's not just the world of the salesperson that's changing, the world of the buyer is changing as well. Now, we just did our first ever buyer study. I can't believe we hadn't done one in all the years as a company, but we went out and surveyed over 500 B2B buyers. These are people that were making at least $10,000 decisions for their company, had to be in a senior role, had to be in companies of greater than $250 million. But what we asked them is, when you go out to find information about solutions, where do you go? What are the top 3 choices that you go to? Number 1 on the list was subject matter experts, industry experts. What I want is an independent person to come back and say, here's what we're seeing. Number 2 is, I trust my own past experience. If I've had a good relationship with a solution provider, I'm likely to do things with them. Here we see the importance of marketing coming back through, vendor websites. Number 3, trade shows and conferences, peers and colleagues, again, trying to get feedback from people that are in similar positions to me. But look where their salesperson is on this list. Number 9. And so all of a sudden we're starting to realize that, hey, things are changing from the buyer's perspective. When I started off with IBM a million years ago, one of the things they had to do, customers had to go through me as the account manager to get information, because we didn't publish our price list. The internet wasn't out there with all the information that it has today. So salespeople were actually very involved. Now we're 9th on the list. And granted, we may not be number 1, but can we at least get up to number 3? So that's one of the things too sales enablement needs to look at. How do I turn salespeople into subject matter experts, where they're not viewed as just a vendor's mouthpiece? They're actually viewed as somebody who knows a lot about what's going on. So that's the second challenge. Now, I've been sharing this with friends of mine and saying, what do you think about this? Here's how we see buying and selling changing. And when I did this with one of my friends who's in the e-commerce space, he says, you got something missing here, Jim. And I said, what am I missing? He says, there's an alternative view for B2B sales. And I said, what's that? And he says, you ought to take a look at Alibaba. And I go, Alibaba? I'm thinking Alibaba. Alibaba's like Amazon for China. That's where the Chinese go if they want to get, their cell phone, they want to download, they want to get, basketball shoes for their kids. They want to get, the latest and greatest, products for their home, B2C. And he said, no, man, you're missing the whole tag. He said, take a look at their tagline. Their tagline is global trade start here. And Alibaba's thinking all trade. And he actually brought up his system and he showed me that on Alibaba today, I can go get information on buying 1 million yuan, which works out to $290,000 piece of mining equipment. I can go on there and it showed me that I could get 10 $40,000 a piece solar powered communications towers. And he says, you got to understand, Alibaba is hiring tons of data scientists. Like they've got over 1,000 PhDs that are working on disintermediating the salesperson from the customer. They're saying, even in the B2B space, why talk to a salesperson? Come here first. Come to Alibaba. Because we're going to have tools that will help you clarify what your needs are. Based on that, we'll identify the 3 vendors who should be on your short list. We'll do a robust feature comparison of each one of those folks. We'll tell you how much people are really paying for this stuff. We'll give you feedback on what people like, don't like about it. We'll also go back through and tell you what terms and conditions they'll negotiate the contracts and which ones they won't. And by the way, when you're ready to process your order, we'll do that. And by the way, we'll do it at a fraction of the cost of a sales force. So we live in a challenging world right now. Performance is going down for salespeople. Buyer expectations are there. If we don't do something, somebody like Alibaba or Amazon Web Services or anybody else in the e-commerce space could kind of, come between us and the buyer. So there really is a huge challenge right now that says we've got to go back through and put a lot of time and effort into sales enablement, into optimizing how we do things. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about sales enablement, but let me start off by telling you what it's not. You know, sales enablement is not just a new term for sales training. It's not part of marketing in terms of creating collateral. It's not tech tools that you plug into CRM. All those things are part of the overall strategy, but think of sales enablement as being like the orchestra conductor. You know, they will go through and take a look at a problem and say, okay, what does this mean in terms of what do we need to do with sales training? What do we need to do with marketing? But they're going to coordinate all of the efforts behind these initiatives. And that's really where the power comes into this thing, where they can go back through and start getting people to work together to solve real problems on this. So what is sales enablement? Well, my colleague Tamara Shank just released her book, Sales Enablement. She co-authored it with my other colleague, Byron Matthews. And here's her definition. I think Tamara's in a unique position to really define what sales enablement was, because before she joined CSO Insights, for 6 years, she was vice president of sales enablement for T-Systems, their communications company in Germany. And she had a €7 million budget for just her piece of sales enablement. That's separate from training, separate from CRM. So she's actually been going out and doing these things. And here's how she defines sales enablement. She says, first off, it's a strategic collaborative discipline. Like I just said, it's the orchestra conductor. You know, it's going back through and saying, okay, we need to focus on this new product induction problem we've got. So I need to get together the people in marketing, the people in finance who are working on pricing, the people in CRM are working on technology. It's all work together on this thing. So it's much more collaborative in terms of nature than sales ops would be. It's also designed to increase predictable results. Well, how does it do that? To both customer-facing professionals, salespeople, but also frontline sales managers to add value at every customer interaction. And that's really the challenge we've got to do. We've got to start figuring out how do we get salespeople to be seen as a value-add resource, not ninth on the list, but up at that subject matter expert. And so we're starting to see more people implement these types of programs, but we're starting to see kind of mixed results. You know, from our 2017 sales enablement study, we went out and we asked, of the programs that you fully implemented last year, you know, what happened? Well, 5.9% of the companies came back and said, we met or exceeded all of our expectations. 28.7% said we met or exceeded the majority of our expectations. But then you got a whole bunch of people, like, you know, almost 41% who said, we did, you know, we met some of the things we said we were going to do. Now, the question that always begs is that success or is that failure? And I will put it in the success column if you tell me that when they went to sales management, and in some cases had to go to executive management, because some of these sales enablement initiatives are in the millions of dollar ranges in terms of investment, that when they went and cost justified it, they said, we're going to implement this program, and guess what? We might even achieve some of our expectations. You know, that's not what they said. They said they were going to do a lot more. So you've got that group who kind of underperformed. You've got 10.3% who really underperformed. You got 14% who didn't even try anything. You know, they were maybe just, you know, hey, you know, we're too busy trying to do things day to day. We can't get better, but we've got to get better on things. So let's talk about really the interesting thing I went back through is let's talk about the almost 1/3 who are really doing this right. And we've taken a look at some phenomenally successful programs in this area where people have really gone out and done things. One of my favorites is John Williams. John took as senior vice president of sales marketing, took his technology company from 700 million to 2.2 billion in 4 years. Now, that's impressive, but there have been other technology companies that have had a 300% increase in revenues, but John did it without adding any net new salespeople. So it's just not a 300% increase in revenues, it's a 300% increase in revenues per salesperson. That's phenomenal. By the way, during that same 4-year period, the stock price quadrupled. That's the way to get executive management, even the board's attention, is to sit there and say, here's how I can move the revenue down. So let's take a look at 5 critical success factors for you to think about, you know, how are we going to do sales enablement within our company? What are the things we should be focused on? And the first thing I want you to do is realize you need to know what you're up against. You know, Peter Drucker is one of my favorite people for, you know, really just simplifying, massive transformation change. And he talked about the fact that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And boy, that ought to be the watchword for your sales enablement objectives. Because you can sit there and say, well, I got a sales training strategy. And by the way, I got a compensation strategy. And they're all going to be different. We're going to implement these. You got to take a look, what culture am I dropping those things into? Because culture can sit there and crush the ability of any of these strategies to be successful. So what do you do about that? One of my favorite success stories was Alan Lamb. Alan, when we first met him, was Senior Vice President of Sales, Marketing, and Support for Fairchild Semiconductor. He was brought in by Chuck Thompson, the CEO. And Chuck sat there and said, here's what I want you to do. You need to solve the problem of value in the marketplace. Our margins are just too low. Revenues are okay, but we need to go and make more money in the marketplace. We need people to be willing to pay a higher price for what they buy from us. And so, Alan's looking at this thing and he takes a look at how Fairchild's currently done. He says, the position in the marketplace back then was we're cheap and we can deliver tomorrow. Well, cheap can be beat by cheaper. And, when you have, things and disruptions in the supply chain, it may impact your ability to deliver tomorrow. So I went back there and said, okay, we need to change this. And that's the culture we are. And everybody thinks inside of Fairchild, we're cheap and we can deliver tomorrow. And we need a value culture. So what did he do? He went back through and said, okay, here's my new strategy. And the first person he sold that strategy to was the CEO. Went back to Chuck and said, here's what I want to do. And by the way, it's changing the entire culture. It's not just the sales culture. If we implement these things, I'm going to need a different level of support from manufacturing. I'm going to need a different level of support from finance, marketing, customer support, distribution. Everything's going to change. Now, when I go to these organizations and I talk about change, if I get pushback and all of a sudden we need somebody to break the tie, I want to know you got my back. Because if you're not willing to do this, if you're not willing to back this up, then we need to know that right now because I'm not going to be successful. Wow. How many of us will go to our boss and say, okay, here's what you need to do. You've told me what I need to do. Great, here's what you need to do. And he got Chuck to back him. What did he do the second time? He went and got all of his direct reports. And he brought them all together and he said, here is my vision of how we're going to move Fairchild from cheap, deliver tomorrow, to value add player in the marketplace. Respected solution consultant, trusted partner. And when he laid it out for them with his direct reports, they came back and identified 36 barriers to success that were deemed unsolvable. And Alan goes, great, I appreciate your candor. But I already promised Chuck we're going to do this. So before I update my resume and go look for a job someplace else, because we can't do it, because we got these 36 barriers, can we go work on these for a little bit just so I understand why they're unsolvable? And so just at that senior management level, not introducing everything to the rest of the organization yet, just at that senior level, they went back and formed little task forces and they started taking a look at those. And a couple months later, they came back and the 36 problems were still there, but 32 were deemed solvable, 4 were deemed hard. So you got that buy-in up front. So it's, are we ready to change the culture? Because if you're not, be ready for your projects to underperform or just outright fail. So second critical success factor is going in and starting to take a look at, what problems are we finding? And a lot of times what we find is when we ask people, how are you setting priorities for sales enablement? It was, we do a lot of one-off projects. We're going to be hiring a whole lot of salespeople, so we got to get sales enablement focused on onboarding. Or we just lost a huge deal. Why did we lose it? Well, because the salesperson did a lousy job on negotiations. Okay, let's put everybody through negotiations training. They go, really? You lost the deal. Is it that one person didn't know how to do negotiations, or is it really true the entire sales force doesn't? But here's the thing. When you start taking a look at customer lifecycle management, all the things that we do with our clients, there's a whole bunch of things we do to get in the game, lead generation. There's a whole bunch of things that we need to do to play the game in terms of needs analysis, persona-based education, solution configuration. There's a whole bunch of things that we do to win the game around closing. Building that proposal, going through negotiations on those things, getting it to yes, cost justifying the investment. And then there's keep winning, post-sales, going in and expanding in the account. And really what we need to start doing is let's make a list of all of the things that need to be fixed. all of them, so that we don't just have a knee-jerk reaction. Now, may come back, as I mentioned John Williams earlier. When John did this analysis for his company, he came up with 52 major initiatives that needed to be done. But in John's mind, sales transformation is not doing everything 1 or 2% better. It's about doing 1 or 2 things an order of magnitude better, and then a couple more, and a couple more, and a couple more. And so prioritize these things based on which of these things have the biggest bang for the buck, and which one of these things do we think we can pull off. And then what you do is go implement a couple of projects over a 90, 120-day period, and then another couple of projects, another couple. So is that incremental things based on having a total knowledge of all the problems we're solving, but knocking them off one at a time. Because he said if you try to take on too much, that's revolutionary change, and people die in revolutions. I want to have evolutionary change, where we fix things and people realize we're there to make things more successful. So critical success factor number 3 is realizing that when we do this, we're going to spend some money on this stuff. And so how do we go about setting the stage for people to not have sticker shock? So let's say I take a look at coaching. I come back through and I say, we've done a survey of the sales organizations. They rate the coaching they're getting as being subpar. We're inconsistent on how we do it. It's just not effective enough. We don't have enough time. So we need to fix coaching. Okay. Well, when you start talking about fixing it, well, it might mean I got to train more. It might mean I've got to go get more technology. It might mean I need to change the compensation plan to reward managers for doing coaching. All of a sudden, you start seeing all these dollar signs add up on, hey, this thing's going to cost money. So here's the thing to do to lay the groundwork for that is go take a look at what's the cost of doing nothing. Now, specifically around coaching, when we've done analysis of companies, we find that there are 4 different ways that they do coaching. Number 1 is that they leave it up to the individual manager. So it's random coaching. Hey, you're the manager, you got your team, you figure it out. 2, we move up to there's an informal process. It's, hey, there's some suggestions we have for you. Like maybe there's a little informal training, but it's a process that's not reinforced or enforced, but at least it's a starting point. It starts to get everybody kind of working together on the same page. 2, there's a formal process. We have a process in place, everybody's trained on it, they're expected to use it. To dynamic process, there's not only a formal process, but we have all the systems in place to monitor that process, to see how we're going. So go back through and start figuring out what's the cost of doing nothing. Let me share with you the analysis that we did on this. When we take a look at random coaching, where you leave it to the individual manager, one of the key litmus tests for us is, okay, most coaching is around opportunity coaching. So what happened to opportunities? Of the deals you forecast, what percentage ended up in the win column? And for those companies on average last year, it was 43.6% win rate. Now, let me put this in perspective for you. If you go to Vegas right now, go to the area hotel, go to the craps tables and make a pass bet, your odds of winning are 49.3%. So random coaching is going to produce results that are worse than going to Vegas and rolling the dice. So that should not just be a sales manager. But what happens is that really a problem though? Does coaching make a difference? So we took a look at companies that are doing informal process. What we found was their win rate goes up to 50.9%. So a 7.3% increase in win rate. That is significant out there. Go figure out if you went from closing 43.6% of the deals you forecast to 50.9%. What would the impact be on revenues? By the way, what would the impact be on stock price? But is that the end result? The answer is no. If I can get up to formal process, those companies have a 58.8% win rate. And even that's not the end of the rainbow. If I get to dynamic process, I get up to a 66.1% win rate. So here's the power of calculating the cost of doing nothing. You start setting the stage inside of your company, for what's going on. For being able to go in and say, geez, if we do this, here's the size of the prize if we get there. So I think that's the type of thing you want to be able to go in and start sharing with management is, and I'm going to come back to you in a while and I'm going to talk to you about what it's going to cost to fix this problem. But what I'm going to tell you right now, here's the cost of not fixing it. If we leave things the way they are, we're going to continue to get hammered, and we don't have to be. There's a way that we could solve this problem. So critical success factor number 4 is get ready for massive disruption. It's interesting out there that we've been taking a look at a lot of the new technologies coming to marketplace, things that are talking about analytics, things that are talking about AI. And I think there's a lot of things that can go out there and just destroy, just totally blow up ineffective processes that we have today. But it's going to cause major disruption. And we got to start looking outside the box, really looking for this creativity that's coming to the market today. So let's take a look at something like, strategic account planning. All of us talk about doing it. Yes, we ought to have strategic account plans. But when you take a look at them, most of the time when you open them up, they're like, there's not a lot of meat here. So one of the things that you are expected to do when you do a strategic account plan is you do relationship mapping. Here are all the people that I'm going to be calling on these accounts, and here's what I think about them. Because you get to ask questions, well, is this person a supporter? Is this person a disruptor? Is this person amiable? What happens if you've never met those people? How do you do that? Or what if you had 1 or 2 meetings with those folks? How do you go in and fill out those things? Here's where we got to start doing things and think about blowing up that whole process. And let me walk you through something that was just eye-opening for me, talking about massive disruption that's happening today and will totally change things like strategic account planning going forward. I got a call from a company in the UK, and they said, saw some of the work that you did, saw the session you did on YouTube where you were talking about AI and coming to sales, and I'd like to talk to you about what we do. And it's great, what do you do? And they said, well, we would do psychophysiological, visceral, personality, persona analysis of buyers. And I go, I have no idea what that means. And they go, yeah, it's kind of a lousy elevator pitch. It's better if we show you what we do. And I go, okay, show me what you do. And they said, go check your email. And in my email, there's an 18-page report on me. Now, they have never met me. But let me share with you some of the things they shared with me by utilizing AI. Because what they said is, we view AI as becoming your personal research assistant. As opposed to you going in and trying to look somebody up on LinkedIn and try to find if they're on Twitter and try to see what they've been saying and learn from something like that. What if you had this? And here's what was in the report on me. Page 1 is a complete summary of my social media presence. Here's Jim Dickey on LinkedIn. Here's my complete work history. Here's my educational background, but also I'd say, hey, Jim's on Twitter, Jim's on Google+, Jim's over on Facebook. Over here, what we find was there was a whole bunch of things on links within Google to talks that I've done that you could get access to on YouTube, etc. Talking about topics like sales coaching, like AI for sales, like sales and marketing alignment or sales enablement. Here was a word chart of words that I use in posts that I talk about. So here are things that are meaningful to me. So right here on one page now is all the information I need to start doing that relationship mapping. Start talking about, okay, here is this person that I haven't met yet, but I'm going to have to work with. I'm going to start doing things and I have progress with. A little bit later, I think it was page 15 or so, what they did was they did a personality profile analysis of me. Again, they've never met me. But they're using Watson personality insights, and over here they talk about the fact that Jim has a high activity level, Jim is very assertive, Jim has very detail oriented. Over here, Jim is not very emotional on things in terms of business. So it starts to give you ideas of who I am. I found this fascinating too. It also talked about when am I social? Because I do a little bit on social. I'm not out there every day, but mostly what I found was I'm mostly busy on Saturdays and Sundays. Well, how would you use that if you were a salesperson? Well, what you do is send me an email on the weekend because I'm very active in LinkedIn. I'm on there on the weekends, and that'd be the perfect time for you to reach out to me. So again, getting information about that thing. All of a sudden now the account planning process becomes totally different than we've ever done it before. Here was really the mind blower for me. Was we got into things and it says, here's everything you need to know about contacting Jim. When you reach out to him, realize that Jim is a pragmatic, he needs logical reasons for everything, but he's willing to take a calculated risk when necessary. I looked at my personality attributes, they were all spot on. Communication styles, yep. Be clear, get down there. Motivation, you have one thing wrong. It says, Jim may struggle with sarcasm. I have a PhD in sarcasm. But other than that, here's my work style. So again, this is the type of thing out there. We've got to start looking and say, why are we doing the forecast process the way that we are doing it, the last 20 years? Why are we doing territory analysis and segmentation the way that we've done it the last bunch of years? And I think that's really one of the goals too of sales enablement. Let's get outside the box. Let's go take a look at. So let's get into critical success factor number 5 is, don't go it alone. I get calls a lot of times and people will talk about, okay, here's my problem. My problem is onboarding. My problem is, margins are down. We've got too high a customer churn. And, I just talk about it, say, okay, well, great. What are you going to do about it? And say, I know, where should we start? I said, well, the first thing you should start with is, who benefits if you succeed? Who might owe you a favor? And they go, what do you mean? I said, well, let's take a look at this thing. Your manufacturing company. Yep. I said, who do you use to ship all your products to your customers? FedEx. Okay, FedEx has done some phenomenal things over the years in sales enablement. And they're willing to share. Why? Because if you're successful as a FedEx customer and you start selling more, guess what? You're going to ship more. Their revenues go up. I talked about who's your banking relationship with? Well, Zion's Bank. Okay, great. So if you're successful, what happens? Well, you're going to grow. So your lines of credit might get bigger. Your credit card processing might go up. So Zion Bank's got a total, thing of, boy, I want you to be successful. They've also done some phenomenal things around the area of sales coaching. Think about the technology stack that you use. If you're using Salesforce.com, how does Salesforce benefit if you're successful? Well, you're going to hire more salespeople. You're probably going to upgrade your licenses and add in new things like Einstein capabilities. So yeah, in fact, that's why you take a look at Salesforce.com. They've got the Trailhead resource that's available, that tells you here's all sorts of things that other peers of yours are doing. So information you could use to get a better return on your investment on these things. Here's how to do these things that utilize, something like Trailhead for onboarding. So, there are 2.5 million Trailhead members, I believe, in terms of going out there that are, trailblazers. So go out and start figuring out who are we doing business with that we could ask, can we come in and see what you're doing? Because in all the years when we have asked companies, can we come in and see what you're doing and around sales enablement, we've been turned down one time. It was by a beverage manufacturer who was making pop. I won't mention their name. But I said, can we come in and see what you're doing? They said, no. I said, come on, man, you're making sugary, fizzy water. It's totally secret. Can't tell anybody. But that was the only time we've ever been turned down. So start to leverage your network out there. Let me give a plug also for the Sales Enablement Society. They got started last year, had their first conference. Their second conference is coming up this September. I believe it's September 16th through the 19th. It's going to be in my backyard in Denver. And these again are people where there's chapters all over the U.S. starting to go international too, where I've been down to some of the meetings in Denver. And these are people in those positions. They're sharing ideas. They're sharing best practices. They're talking about what do we do about those things. So go leverage that type of thing. We continue to be a resource out there. If you go to csoinsights.com, you can download our 2017 Sales Enablement Report. We do that study every summer. We'll be doing it again this year, and we put the results out there. Download it for free. But I'll go in there and talk about the advantages of having a charter, the advantages of setting goals, the need to collaborate, so you can get some of these best practices going out there. So I really think that there are resources that you can start turning to get a lot better return on investment from what you've been doing, spending on sales effectiveness. So let me share with you some final thoughts out there, because we've taken a look again at hundreds of sales enablement initiatives. And in looking at those things, there's 4 things that you need to understand about this thing. And the first thing is that it's not easy. You are really going to have to challenge some sacred cows within your organization in terms of why are we doing things today that we've been doing for the last 20 years. You see how far processes come, you see how much information is available to you, you see about the advances in technology, you see about the challenges we're facing today didn't exist 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So you've got to go back through and realize that as we do this, it gets back to that culture statement. We got to start dealing with this thing, and we're going to run into challenges. So run into that up front. And I think one of the key things you need to do on this is realize the first sale you need to make with sales enablement's an internal sale. You know, anytime you're going to introduce something like a new sales process, like new technologies, like a new compensation plan, like a new coaching model, you're replacing something. You know, you've been doing things like that, but you're telling salespeople and sales managers you have to change, and they've got a God-given right to sit there and say, what's in it for me? And you better be able to answer that. You know, because otherwise, you know, they're going to say, hey, why do I change? I went to the sales club last year. You know, I was 120% of quota. So again, we've got to go through and realize there's a human side of this thing, and we got to deal with that up front. Second thing is that it's not fast. You know, if you go through and you do that analysis of your customer lifecycle management, you take a look at all the things you could do, you're going to have a long list. And it's going to take you a long time to do those things. And by the way, we live in a very frail ecosystem. So, you know, 6 months from now, that list may be changing. There may be some things that have moved up in terms of criticalness that I need to fix. There may be some new things that popped up. You know, some of the things may have gone away, so I've got to constantly be doing that. But look at, this is going to be something you do forever. You're always going to be looking, what's the next thing to do to improve, next thing to do, next thing to do, and that's okay. You know, give your self permission to have a phased approach to this thing. Third thing is, it's not cheap. You're going to spend money on this thing. But again, if you start taking a look at the cost of doing nothing, you're going to start finding that the cost of not fixing problems is order of magnitudes more than the cost of actually fixing them. And lastly, what we're finding here is that it's not an option. You know, you're going to have to do these things. You know, we cannot continue selling. We cannot continue to have that deterioration in sales performance. We cannot continue to have buyers not see salespeople as valuable. We cannot set ourselves up for disruption from, you know, companies like Alibaba coming in and doing these things. And so that's why I think things like, you know, this, you know, the Visualize Summit is there. I hope you've been hashtagging Visualize Summit today, and we'll continue throughout the rest of the things. You know, if you do, you know, we'll send you a copy of Tamara Shank's Sales Enablement book. But I think this is really an important thing, is starting to take a look at that. And as kind of a ask and a give too, we're doing our 25th annual sales effectiveness study. We've been gathering data for a long time, so we've got a lot of historical data, but it's really predicated on people like you sharing your insights and your stuff with us. So the ask is, we're doing the survey right now. Here's the bit.ly link to get to the study. But if you'll take 10 to 15 minutes to give us some feedback on what's going on in your world as a salesperson or a sales manager or a CSO, we're actually going to be breaking apart the results, so you'll get 3 deliverables over the summer. The first is going to be on talent management. You know, what should we be looking for in terms of getting the right talent in place and developing them, and also developing our existing talent and keeping them. Second one's going to be talking about the whole world of sales performance, so we could benchmark ourselves against other companies. How are we doing in terms of revenues, in terms of reps there, in terms of win rate of forecast deals, in terms of turnover. And lastly, it's going to be, what about sales management? What about the people leading our sales teams? So if you will take one time to take the survey, we're happy to send you all of those results over time. So again, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day today. I appreciate the fact that, you know, the Visualize Summit is here as a resource for people. I think this is a great idea to provide ways for us to learn and not have to get on a plane and fly someplace. But again, this is the type of world where sales is going to go through a huge transformation over the next couple of years. I think we're going to see major disruptions, but I think it's going to be all for the better when we come through this thing. I think the value the salespeople are going to bring is going to increase. So just as we go through this, let's all go through it together. So I hope you have a great rest of the time with the Visualize Summit. I wish you yourself good selling and a good future. Thank you.